the way you treat Christians, what does that say about you? Let's dive right in. James, in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 31 and almost to the end of the chapter, Jesus tells this story about how we are really interacting with people in regards to what we might do for them if we see them hungry or thirsty, and how we can help them if we see them in prison and we go visit them, or if they're sick and we care for them. You asked me to comment on a question that you had just a little bit ago, and that was, how do we perceive, like, for example, the statement that Jesus made to Saul of Tarsus in Acts 9, when he said, Saul, Saul, as you're killing these Christians, why are you persecuting me? Is what we're doing, is how we're treating other people or other Christians, is it really the way God perceives us? Is it that we're doing it directly to him?
Yeah. No, I mean, that was, I think, one of the biggest shock factors to Paul, because Paul's chasing after these Christians and everything, and he in his mind has separated the Christian from God entirely. And so when God says to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Not only was he shocked by the miraculous, but he was shocked by the direct revelation that I've been chasing and attacking God this whole time by attacking the Christians. And that's something that he's very, very serious about, that when, John chapter 1, it says he gave us the power to become sons of God. Romans 8 talks about the adoption as sons. Right. We are representatives. We are ambassadors, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, of Jesus Christ. We are God's children through Christ. We're adopted through him. We have the ability to be children because of Christ. So one of the big revelations of the New Testament is how you treat a Christian is also how you treat God. So for us who are Christians in the church, be careful how you talk about other Christians. Wow. If you gossip about Christians, then you're actually talking bad and about God, despite that they're in the wrong.
Even though I know that intellectually, that is in practice a humbling thought, a chilling thought, that I really am to see in every Christian. I am to look even. Now, I'm not saying we don't look past that we look past sin and don't try to help each other grow. I'm not talking about that. But I'm saying when I look at a Christian, I'm to see primarily in them the presence of God and the good things about them that are tied to their relationship with God, and that's what I'm to focus on. James, we don't do that as a church very well.
No, and I think that's one of the things that's really overlooked, is that if you really sit down and you think for a moment that how, especially his children, if you believe you're a child of God and you believe the church is filled of his children, then you need to step back and think for a moment especially if you have children. If someone pushes your child or does something wrong to your child, how will you get? Okay. So, it's personal. It gets real personal real fast, and I know this is personal for you, but right now one of your daughters is in the hospital. It's personal. It's personal for you and your wife. And God takes it very personal. So if his children are attacking each other, God takes that personal, as a personal attack. So if we were to disinfuse that into our attitude towards one another in the church and really take it seriously as, you're my family, you belong to God, how I treat you is how I'm treating God in that moment. Boy, I better watch out how I talk about you, how I think about you, and how I treat you, because you're valued by God.
And in this story of Matthew 25, this is the measure that he chooses to use for the separation of the sheep from the goats. He's saying the sheep are identified by these actions and the goats are identified by the lack of these actions. And what are they? Well, he says it. He says, I was hungry, you gave me something to drink. to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. You gave me clothes when I was naked. When I was sick, you visited me. When I was in prison, you came to me. And then they will say, the sheep, when did we do all of those things? And he said, well, as much as you did it to one of these brothers of mine, you did, even the least of them, you did it to me. Well, James, I don't know about you, but if I'm reading all of that info that Jesus said, it is even, I don't want to make one more important than the other.
Sure.
But he's basically saying when you really help the one who is the least, that almost has, I don't want to say it has more value, but this passage is kind of insinuating that it's like, wow, that's when it really matters, because this guy can do nothing in return. There is no doubt that you did it out of your love for me, because there's no other motive there could possibly be. This guy could never do anything back for you. Yeah. There could be no ulterior motive. Oftentimes in Christianity, our giving, our actions have ulterior motives. Sometimes we give hoping that we shall receive. Sometimes we help someone hoping they'll help us, or we befriend someone because we really want their friendship. And Jesus is really saying here, what really matters is your motivation has got to be because you love me. Very different.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Someone was telling me this information came up a lot during the beginning of COV, 2020.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to say it out loud because it might cut off the video. But there was an article that spread really fast at the very front end. I don't know if you saw it on Facebook, it was talking about the history of hospitals and how hospitals today were pretty much formed by the attitude of Christians, because Christians were willing to visit the sick. And I'm talking about people who had the plague, who had diseases. Christians would go visit these people because of this passage. Where if you go visit so-and-so and comfort them while they're sick, you could die too. Why would you do that? Right. And yet, that's what Christians did. And I saw this posted by multiple people. And then the false teaching came around saying that, well, if you put something over your face, you're loving your neighbor. If you don't, you're hating your neighbor. And it's like, were we just saying that we were the ones willing to just go in there and give our lives because we live by faith and not by sight? And then the church just did a 180 within a few weeks. I mean, you just saw all these different emotions, and the one that won out was the one, well, you better cover up, or, you're not loving your neighbor. I think that's interesting, but we were known for going and doing things that we would not get return from. And in some cases, we could even die because we did. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Caring for those who not only cannot care for themselves, but for those who could actually bring us harm. And that ties into so many stories. The story of the Good Samaritan and others in Scripture, where you see God's people, God praising people who are willing to take the risk, who are willing to go into the trenches, and who are willing to do the things that risk their own personal well-being. And that in this setting in Matthew 26, this is really what he's really saying is, what matters is, again, what is your motive in these things? Do you understand why these things are crucial? We cannot separate ourselves from God if we're a Christian. We are one with Him. I did a message years ago where I talked about how we're conduits, and how really all the things that flow, either we're like a conduit that's God attached on one side and humanity or earth experience attached to the other. When people treat us poorly, they're not treating us poorly, they're treating God poorly. Again, Saul on the road to Damascus, why are you persecuting me? So what Jesus is saying, this is your actions through these Christians. It's not the Christians that I'm focused on that are dying. It's the fact that you're hurting me through their death, the conduit, right? And it goes the other way. I receive gifts from God, and I'm to use them to be a blessing to others. So I'm supposed to literally be this conduit that runs two ways. And when I see myself that way, all of a sudden my attachment to God is so pure, I no longer even have to get upset when people do something to me, because they're not doing it to me, they're doing it to God.
Yeah. Well, and isn't that interesting, is that if I claim to be a Christian, everything that I do is supposed to represent Jesus Christ. But
Correct.
everything I do everything I participate in treating others is also how I'm treating Jesus Christ. So it's
Yes.
this two-sided reality. And I guarantee you, most of life's problems would be able to be processed and handled much better if you thought in those terms. One, I'm representing God right now. And then two, how I treat you is how I'm treating God.
Yes.
Well, that would add a layer of understanding to everything you do.
It does. And it becomes a filter that keeps you from becoming angry, because you realize the anger is not directed at you, it's directed at someone else. And that allows you to say the things that need to be said, but you also say them in a different way because it's not personal. There's no reason to attack to defend my own personal honor. The honor I'm defending will always be the honor of the Lord, right? And so by doing that, I lift myself out of this temporal realm where everything is about me. And we've talked about this so much. And now everything is about God. And that's one of your favorite sayings. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, this parable, it's not really a parable. It's pretty straightforward, isn't it? I know people call it the sheep and goats parable, Matthew 25, we were talking about. To the least you've done of these, you've done to me. It's pretty straightforward. And this is talking about Judgment Day. And there's a huge chunk of Christendom that doesn't like this text, or they found a way to get around it because they believe in faith alone, grace alone, right? But the key ingredient in this text on Judgment Day is, you love me? How have you treated others? How have you treated those who are in need? I think who was I talking to? I can't remember the name of the guy, but he told me he was sitting on a plane one time. And I think, I remember who he was. I don't want to say his name on the show. And a woman was talking to him, and they started talking about theology. And he says, how do you know that you're saved? And this woman goes, if poor people think highly of you. That's what she said.
Well,
isn't that interesting? If poor people think highly of you. And of course, what was she thinking about? She was thinking about this text. How you treat people in need is a telltale sign of whether or not you're going to heaven.
Right.
And I thought that was powerful.
It is. And of course, I'm not, and you will agree with me, that certainly is not the only measurement of salvation.
Sure,
there are a lot of people who do a lot of really good works with the poor who have a totally different motivation. But it is one way for us to see something about ourselves. And so as Christians, I can say, well, how do I treat the poor? How do I treat the needy? Do I even care about them at all? I get approached, and you probably do as well, fairly frequently from people who are asking or who are in need. We would sometimes call them panhandlers, people who are sitting on a street corner, and they may talk to you when you pass by and ask for money. In fact, that happened to me just last night. But when those things happen, I was with someone when that occurred, and the guy gave him some money, and I did as well, gave him some. And afterward, he said, just wonder what he does with it. And I said, you know what? A long time ago, I gave up trying to judge what he does on the other end. And I realized I'm simply I'm always going to try to think the best, and I'm always going to try to do my best and use every opportunity acting in my own heart as though that's the Lord who's in need at that moment in time. And I don't think I can go wrong with that.
Yeah. But, this parable, to me, it does make you think twice about people you see, what you can do to help someone when they're in need, and understanding that it's all about God. Everything you're doing should be about Him and for Him and by Him. And if you live by those principles, everything will be fine. You'll be able to treat people the way they should. But the outcome of this is what's so terrifying about this text, because again, here is a story from Jesus where, let me just fast forward to the end, where the people who didn't do anything, in fact, it says, I'll start kind of halfway, because he says the same thing, about giving them a drink. And it says, well, when did we ever give you a drink? And it says, verse 41, then he will say to those on the left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. Right. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me. naked and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison and you did not come visit me. Then they themselves all answered, Lord, when did we do all these? When did we not do all these things? Essentially, and then in verse 45 it says, then he will answer them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. These will go away in eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. That's a terrifying conclusion.
It is
absolutely terrifying, and yet it is absolutely true. And where are you? Who are you? Are you a sheep or are you a goat?
Right. Well, I think this story that Jesus tells, of course, it comes on the end of 2 chapters that are dealing with stories about the second coming and also stories about the destruction of Jerusalem. And the summary of it all is right here. All of these judgments that are happening in the world, ultimately, what it comes down to is, what's your judgment? Where are you going to spend eternity? That's really the point of Matthew 24, 20, and 25 combined, is we all make choices, and how we live, how we treat people, what we choose to value. These are the things that are going to determine where you spend eternity. And James, as we wrap up today, I just want to say that I think there are a lot of people who fail to have changed lives because they've not allowed God to change them. You can't help but be there for those in need when the love of God touches you and you have a broad realization of who you are in the kingdom. And so our hope for all of you that are watching today is that you'll let God change you, and that the relationship you have with him will be one that affects the world. And never forget, when you do for those who are in need, you're doing it for God himself. We'll see you next time.